Ladies and gentlemen, everyone around and in between, it is Debate Sensei, NFA LD Edition, where we talk about things relevant to competitive debate, specifically in the National Forensics Association Lincoln Douglas event. I have with me Dr. Justin Kirk from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, the Director of Debate. Thank you very much, Justin.
How's it going, Jared? It's been a nice little winter break we've had from the podcast, but we're back with some results and some new arguments to talk about.
Nice. Well, you're being snowed in a little bit right now, huh?
Yeah, we didn't cancel school today, but there's a good 6 inches of snow on the ground right now.
Okay. So. All right. Well, I mean, that is it's kind of I heard about Kansas getting flooded. So that's
I was in Kansas over the break whenever they got hit with their big storm right around New Year's, and had to trek back to Lincoln in a 4-wheel drive vehicle with some of my students. So,
oh man. Well, I'm wishing the best for them. So we are talking in this episode. We are recapping the Gorlock Gala. All right. Yep. Gorlock, yeah. So give me a little bit of background on the significance of this tournament.
Yeah, the Gorlock Gala is one of our kind of like mainstay national tournaments. It's been around longer than I've been around in NFA LD. I think it's probably been around as long as NFA LD has been around, if not longer. Okay. It's been around for 25 or 30 years. Great tournament. They've recently just moved back to a full in-person kind of tournament experience. And we really enjoy going because they have they do this thing called the St. Louis Fair where they get a bunch of food from around St. Louis. And bring it in and give everybody like lunch and dinner with some like great St. Louis like staple meals. And they do a great award ceremony. They give out a lot of really good awards that are like community driven awards and things like that. So it's always been just a really great kind of celebration of the first half of the spring semester. And is usually kind of the big first tournament for LD teams to come out and break new arguments they've been working on over the winter. Typically also the Gorlock Gala elim bracket, when all the majors are there, is kind of representative of what nationals elims will look like. Okay. Typically the winner of the Gorlock is either somebody who's in the top running for the national championship or somebody who everybody kind of is kind of aware that like they could have a shot at the national championship. So I think like looking at the elim bracket at the Gorlock is a good kind of predictor of what your top 15 to 20 debaters are going to be at nationals. And given that nationals is a double octafinal break, it's about half of the pool that you'll see in the elims there.
Okay.
But like I said, this is a great spring tournament that kind of like launches the spring semester off and is a good predictor of where people are headed into kind of the run to NFA.
Yeah, I'm looking at the entry. We had over 30 teams there. We had the big hitters as always. Washburn, Western Kentucky. UNL's bringing some heat as well. But Truman in Texas, Texas State, Texas Tech, Sacramento State. All right, cool.
Yeah, and I would say the Gorlock's kind of weird because sometimes it happens like the weekend after school starts for people, and sometimes it happens 3 weeks into the semester. And we've moved to having a January tournament in Nebraska, so most of our students are like back that week. But a lot of other schools are like back for a few weeks before. So sometimes you get like our entry was a little small at the Gorlock just because it was early in the semester for us.
Right.
It's an interesting tournament that doesn't like sometimes you'll see a lot of students from one or two schools, and then some schools they're just not even in school yet. Okay. So it's kind of interesting that way. But yeah, everybody was there except I think North Texas didn't send their top debaters. So those would be the only ones that I think would be kind of not on the list of the competitors for kind of deep out rounds at nationals.
Okay. Do you know why that is?
I think it's just travel.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a 4-day tournament, right? Like you got to go in on Thursday night. You don't leave till Sunday.
Right.
NFA is a week this year. It's a 5-day tournament in Detroit. That's a big expense for everyone. And I think we have definitely cut our travel schedule back because of the cost of NFA this year.
Okay.
So I think that's a consideration for a lot of teams. I don't know for sure, but that would be my guess.
Okay. That's longer than normal.
I mean, it's not longer than normal. It's just NFA's 5 days is a law.
Yeah. It's a long time. It is.
And buy food for your team and travel to another city and things like that. So
okay. Okay. Just so anybody watching knows, this was back in January 22nd to the 26th. All right. So we're covering this a month later.
Last weekend of January, first week of the Trump administration.
Yeah. Right. Oh, man, that must have been. Oh, wow. Okay.
We'll talk about some of the new arguments related to that.
Oh, wow. I didn't think about that sort of lining up there.
Well, and given that most of Trump's moves early on have a lot to do with AI,
right?
There was a lot of shift in the way the resolution kind of played out at this tournament versus other tournaments.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about how some of these teams and individuals performed, and we'll get into some of these arguments here. Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
So, well, let's talk a little bit about Novice. Novice seems to have a small entry. Am I remembering wrong? Does NFA LD, typically have larger Novice?
It typically does. And I would say that, I think once again, you get a little bit of a push and pull with the spring semester. I mean, I think we talked about this a little bit in the first half of the semester. Most of our tournaments in the fall were online. And there's 5 in-person tournaments in a row in the spring. And so I think a lot of people are picking and choosing in the spring a little bit more than they had to in the fall. So whereas we had big novice, big JV pools in the fall, those were a lot of online tournaments. And I know that one of the things we're doing in NFL LD is trying to bring in newer and smaller programs, right? And so I think with the schedule like we have in the spring, without kind of a set national circuit schedule, people are making choices on what tournaments they're going to in the spring. So I think here Pitt was at this tournament, but Fullerton wasn't, right? And so Fullerton's got a huge novice contingent that's going to the Western Kentucky tournament in 2 weeks, right? And they just didn't travel to the Gorlock. So I think that has a lot to do with it here too, is the stacking of in-person tournaments versus the fall being online. Having said that, though, the novice debaters that did show up, I mean, these are kind of up and coming, really good programs. Like I mentioned, Pitt was here. One of their coaches, Al Primick, has been kind of a contributor to a lot of the stuff that we've been doing on the podcast here. Shout out to Al. But they closed out finals in novice. Zoe Smith and Anna Sinya both had a really good performance. And if I'm looking at this correctly, Zoe and Anna were also the top 2 speakers in novice. Yes. So Pitt had a really good performance. Illinois College's Mia Bioshar, who I saw debate this past weekend at Matha, did pretty well. 3rd speaker overall, and I think she made it to semis.
Excellent. Well, that's very nice. That's nice. I see. I was looking at the overall results, and I see Simpson did great overall in debate, but it seems like they didn't really have a large NFA entry. I guess that was all IPDA.
Simpson does both. So typically they will compete in IPDA and TIPTA, and then they have a few debaters like Ryan Magliese who do NFA LD. And Ryan is perpetually in our kind of regional circuit in finals, semifinals, stuff like that. So I mean, Simpson's always been a program that has prided itself on having multiple debate formats, being kind of an all-service program.
Okay. Where is Simpson?
Simpson, I think, is in Iowa. I want to say it's in Iowa.
Look that up real quick. Yeah. So, I don't remember covering Simpson much in previous results, so that's why I was interested. I'm like, who's Simpson? And when I competed, Simpson used this can't be right. Redding, California? No, that's the wrong one.
Yep.
There's another Simpson.
Indianola, Iowa.
Okay.
Yep. I knew it was close. I knew it was close to us.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, I'm seeing it now. All right. Excellent. Okay. So amongst the open debaters, we're seeing some of the people that were even on the pod last year as well.
Yes.
We have Faye and Cade and but a lot of the names that we're familiar with. Nick, Josh. I'm just throwing out.
And a lot of seniors on this list too, right? You've got Ann Smith from Lewis and Clark, who's been, debating for 4 years now. Ryan Magliese is a senior this year. So a lot of folks in this bracket in Octos, whose hard work over the several seasons they've been debating is showing off.
So the way that forensics so the online tournament that the tournament management system is forensics tournament for this one, and it doesn't really have the bracketing system that you have in tab,
no,
right?
they don't really show a visual bracket so you can see seeds and whatnot.
Right.
But typically it is, and I think if you refresh it might show this. Yeah, so typically it just randomizes the bracket order, so you can't really tell who's what seed in this unless you kind of do some math with speaker points. I can say that, like, looking at speaker awards,
Right.
or you can go to the results page and it'll tell you what seed they were if you scroll down to the name.
Right.
So like Ann Smith was 13th seed. So you can reconstruct the bracket yourself if you've got a spreadsheet. Mo State GCM was 9th. Missouri State AK was 8th.
Yeah, so I mean, it just makes it a little bit difficult. Is there anybody that, I don't know, we usually like giving out shout outs to people that might have just barely missed the break. It might have been unexpected. Were there any unexpected people that deserve shout out that you know they didn't cut?
I think Nick Schenken from Western Kentucky University is somebody who's consistently in out rounds.
Okay.
Nick was the 18th seed. And we'll talk about Nick's AF here in a minute when we get to new arguments, as well as Ivy Ferdosian from Lewis and Clark. I know that they've been, I think they're in their second year of debate now, if I'm not mistaken. So being 17th seed at the Gorlock, which is always a really tough tournament, is great. And then Illinois State's Braden Bavowski. Huge shout out to Braden. Braden is constantly getting better at debate and always, like, I actually judged, I think, round 3, and I was very impressed with Braden and Taylor's round. I was kind of surprised not to see Braden clear, but 19th seed. So those three really, Ivy, Braden, and Nick, were all kind of folks I would have expected to clear. But seeing them in the kind of that 17, 18, 19 is a really good sign for their kind of performance this semester and headed into nationals.
Okay. So I'm trying to reconstruct this using ChatGPT really quick here. How many people broke?
16. They clear a full octafinal. Yeah.
Full octafinals. So that's just shy of half, which is pretty good. Still good. All right. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the people that did. So, which teams? Let's start with teams. All right, what teams like just broke massive amounts?
So Western Kentucky had 4, Washburn had 2, we had 2, Missouri State had 2, and Truman had 2.
Okay, so it was a pretty good split then, huh?
Yeah, and honestly, like, I think that this is kind of representative of where the balance of power is right now. Washburn, Western Kentucky, us, Truman, Missouri State. If you throw North Texas in there, those are the squads that are consistently breaking multiple people at tournaments. So, Gorlock Octo's fairly representative of what's been going on the rest of the season.
All right, and it looks like it took a 3-3 with some speaks then to break, huh?
It took a 3-3 with some speaks. Yeah, when you're clearing just over half the field, I think Gorlock has cleared a couple of 3-3s in the past few years. So, I always tell my debaters, you're not out of it until the bracket comes out, because you never know.
Yeah.
But yeah, Western Kentucky, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 debaters in octos, and they got 2 walkovers, which is always real nice.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, including top seed, which was Ray, right? Ray went undefeated in prelims, so congratulations to Ray. Good job.
Yep, Ray was top seed, Cade was second seed. I think that's going to be pretty standard for the next foreseeable.
Yeah, okay.
I watched both of them compete at this tournament, and they're debating as well as I've ever seen them debate.
Okay. All right. Anybody that broke that might have been maybe like their first time, or it might have been a good they kind of punched above their weight class.
Shout out to Mo State's Gary Cowdrey Moda, who's in their first year of debate.
Nice.
And I saw them debate in the fall, and not somebody I would have suspected at the beginning of the year, like being in the mix at the Gorlock. So huge shout out to Gary Cowdrey Moda from Missouri State. That's a big get. as well as I think Cole Ingram from Western Kentucky, who Cole's been kicking around in the JV division for a while, and has recently made the switch to open and had some success. But like, I think clearing at the Gorlock's a huge chip on your shoulders, like moving into open, clearing at one of the harder tournaments of the year. That's a big deal. So those two in particular, I would give shout outs to, because they, I think, have moved up recently, either from high school or from JV. And it's pretty impressive at your first Gorlock to be clearing into octos.
Okay. Any upsets in the elimination rounds that happened that are memorable, or anyone that caused any discussion?
Not in the first elim, I don't think. I think all the wins that happened, maybe one upset, you could say Truman Peyton Louders over Grant McKeever from Nebraska. Grant was a semifinalist last year at NFA and has been consistently one of our top two debaters. And Peyton is somebody who's, I think, in their third year, and has really made great strides. Kind of a surprising, not surprising given their seed and how well they were doing at the tournament. But for us, that's a debate that typically I think we would have expected to either be kind of preferenced in or have a slight advantage in. And it was a good debate, right? According to Grant and Peyton, that debate was really close. Peyton was just in finals of the MAFA State Championship Tournament, so one of the top two debaters in Missouri this year. So, something that I think was pretty surprising. But other than that, most of these look pretty straightforward. There are 3 walkovers, Western Kentucky and Mo State.
Okay.
And then like Sage Carter versus Zach Wallenberg, the other debater from our team, that's a coin flip. Those are the 2 best critique debaters in the country. And like on any given day, I think which side you're on, what panel you get, right? That debate is going to be like really the circumstances are going to determine the outcome of that debate in a lot of situations. So I hate to say that like the 2 rounds that we were in were the ones that like I'm calling a little bit of shot on, but I do think that like if you look at all the other ones, there's 3 walkovers, and then Cade Blendon is the number 2 seed, debating the number 15 seed. Ray is getting a walkover. Alfonso Rascon was in semis. And then I think Taylor Tate has just made great strides. Yes, I think the other ones were pretty clear favorites going into these debates. Okay.
Looks like by the time quarterfinals is done and going into sems, it's just Wiki and Washburn. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, Ray ends up beating Missouri State's remaining debater in quarters. Sage beat Taylor in quarters. I judged the Cade Blendon versus Josh St. Peter round. And like I said earlier in the podcast, I think Ray and Cade, as given evidence by the fact that they made it to finals, are debating as well as I've ever seen them. I thought Cade did some stuff in this debate against Josh St. Peter that I wish all debaters would do. So if you're listening at home, one, every time Cade answered or asked a question in cross-X, made eye contact with all 3 judges instead of the opponent. And made like some really ethos-heavy moments in cross-X come back later in the debate as kind of like framing questions for the debate, which I think a lot of debaters don't take advantage of. And I think shows that like this is somebody who's debated for 8 years. And they're kind of at the top of their game right now, and like recognizing moments of weakness in the opponent's structure or arguments. I just thought was like this quarterfinal round was like all the evidence I need that Cade's probably a favorite to repeat this year. Just debating as well as they've debated, as I've seen.
All right. Cade's a senior?
Cade's a senior, yeah.
All right.
And so that set up the semis.
Yeah.
Couple of good semifinals debates, Ray Fournier and Alfonso Rascon from Wiki and Washburn, and then Cade and Sage from Wiki and Washburn.
So kind of mirroring these schools are duking it out, huh?
Yep. And I think that like the results of semis is pretty much in line with what you think would happen in these debates. I do think it's kind of funny that the semifinal debate involved a reading of quotations from this podcast.
Oh, no way. What?
As the evidence in the debate. When I was judging. So let me set this up for you.
Okay.
So Ray is reading a new affirmative, which we'll talk about in a minute. Alfonso reads topicality, saying that AFs about broad artificial general intelligence are not topical. To which Ray reads a quote from me saying, I can see a world in which all apps are topical under automation. Not meaning that all apps are topical, but just I can see a world in which I would be persuaded by that argument. And Ray reads that quote back at me and is like, yo, J. Kirk, you said you think this app is topical. Game over. And then Alfonso intelligently is like, this is kind of like hostage taking. You've read evidence from one of the 3 judges on the panel, and they're like making the argument that like everybody should vote according to like one of the judges on the panel who's also a framer of the resolution. And I was like, this is wild. Yeah.
Whoa.
So we made it.
Okay.
Jared, we made it into debate rounds. People are reading our evidence.
Okay. That is astounding. Okay,
it means I will only be reading pre-written statements about my takes on topicality and the nature of said topical affirmatives from here on out.
I think we should start seeding some of these episodes with like fake stuff and see.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is our episode about like why the AGI app is terrible.
Yeah. Holy moly. Okay. That's astounding.
I mean, I've seen people's cards from like their thesis about debate read in debate, right? Or like Shanara Reed Brinkley's dissertation is frequently read by anti-blackness debaters, or Iggy's thesis at Wake Forest is read by anti-blackness debaters about like debate and blackness. But I've never seen like somebody just like clip a podcast quote from the debater talking about debate and be like, yo, Justin's random thoughts about automation being in the topic are definitive proof that this app is topical. I mean, I appreciate the boldness. I appreciate the moves you got to make to do that.
Okay.
It means they're listening and they're watching and they're cutting the podcast. And so,
yes. Okay. Hey, you know what? They can comment more. Like, that's fine. Like, if you're watching, like, throw some comments on there.
Exactly.
Let other people know about it. Okay. So, what I'm seeing though is that, that Ray, that's the first ballot Ray drops in the tournament. Is in that semis, right? Holy moly! Like,
and Ashley actually voted on the like reading this evidence as hostage taking argument, which I was like, yeah, Ashley voted on that argument, which I was like, I'm close, but like I don't think Alfonso did nearly enough in the NR to kind of like lock that argument down. I've got a pretty high threshold for like judge intervention-y kind of arguments, and I think that like that's a sliding. It's very subjective. Of like, do you think that Ray did wrong in this round by reading this card? And I was like, I don't know that like causing Ray to lose a semifinal round was sufficient, like a sufficient penalty, like too much of a penalty or whatnot. But like, that's clearly something where like, I think it could have easily been a 2-1 for Alfonso. And I would have been sitting. I've been like, I don't care if you read my cards. You know? So I thought it was interesting. It was a good debate. Close debate. Fun.
Okay. Let's talk finals really quick, and then let's talk some positions here. So finals, Cade versus Ray. Ray's on the neg, and this is and Cade hands Ray their first loss, huh?
Yep, and I think that this is kind of how the season's gone for both of these two, right?
Okay.
I think if you look at when they're at the same tournament, when they're competing against each other, they typically either meet in elims, and that's kind of the definitive, like, who's going to win this tournament pick, or they meet in finals, and, you know, it's a draw of, like, did they debate in prelims, and what was their record against each other in prelims, determining seeding, you know? Because I think at this tournament...
Yeah, I'm not seeing that. I don't think
they didn't debate him. They debated round 3, which is a little early.
Oh, and Ray did. Ray
won round 3 against Cade, and that's why Cade was locked out.
I see.
And you know, this is just kind of superstition on my part as a coach. But I like to be AF in elims. I like to speak last in front of 3-person panels. I like having my words be the last words in their head. And honestly, in a pick'em debate like Cade versus Ray, maybe that was the difference. We were on the road by the time this debate happened. My students really wanted to get in the car so we could listen to the Chiefs AFC championship game. So we hit the road after semis, but I heard this debate was really close. And again, it's a pick'em debate, right? Like these two debaters are the best two debaters in the country right now. And if you had to make me bet all the money in my wallet versus all the money in your wallet, I'd say this is your final matchup at NFA if the snakes don't get in the way. Right. Yeah. As long as they're not on the same side of the bracket, this seems to me to be the logical endpoint of the season is these two debaters are kind of headed for a finals matchup. They debated in semis last year. They debated in semis last year.
Okay. All right. Now you were mentioning that there was some new positions, some interesting conceptual stuff that happened at this tournament. Let me in on that.
Yeah. So let's talk about some new AFs that were read. Typically, this is the tournament where new AFs come out. Teams have been working over the break, have been practicing new affirmatives. So Western Kentucky broke a couple new AFs. One is the big stick AF that I was talking about in semis, which is ban all AGI, basically ban all artificial intelligence progress past ChatGPT 4. It's basically ban everything from here on out, we stop. And the argument is that we are getting way too close to activating super intelligence, and we shouldn't do that. And here's a bunch of reasons why. And I knew this AF was coming. I knew this AF was probably coming from one of the big schools. It was very successful at the Gorlock.
Really?
It's one of those AFs that I mean, Ray made it to finals in the AF and lost when they were neg, so they didn't lose the debate on this affirmative. Right. And it has a big AGI will enslave humanity kind of argument, a la science fiction. It will basically turn us into Matrix style batteries. And then the other big advantage is aligning with the EU AI Act. So bringing the US in line with more restrictive EU AI restrictions.
Do you have
that app was interesting?
Example restrictions? What are some of those restrictions?
So the European Union just established a framework for high risk, medium risk, and low risk AI.
And
so things like super intelligence are considered high risk. Any project that could lead to super intelligence is just blanket prohibited in the EU. Right. But things like generative AI are considered medium to low risk, which is the EU won't ban them, but they'll put restrictions on content moderation or you can't create deep fakes, right? So there's kind of a tiered system in Europe now of what they deem to be more or less dangerous. The big answer to this argument, and I think this is just a true argument, is that law was written 3 years ago and passed last year. How much has happened in 3 years in AI? Right? Some of the language in the EU AI Act is way outdated. Right. We're talking GPT 2.5. We're talking pre-open mind. We're talking kind of neural networking publicly available. Right. So a lot of the stuff that's kind of developed in the last 2 or 3 years isn't covered under the EU AI Act. So that's a big problem with that kind of alignment argument. In that vein, Washburn's also reading a new AF that is just an EU alignment AF. That's the EU passed this law. The US should follow on. Our moment for leading the charge on AI has passed, but we could signal our support for this other thing, which we think is really good. And I thought that app was a really smart way to tap into a big literature base on current regulations across the globe, right? And how US can fit into that. Because a lot of the answers to US leadership is how does the US lead? The EU already passed the new prohibitions. That's going to be what everybody kind of models their stuff off of. And so Washburn's new AF was much more kind of a norm setting, norm following kind of AF. International law, EU leads, US follows, that kind of stuff. There was another interesting policy AF from Lewis and Clark. Ann Smith was reading an AF about giving personhood to AI sexual partners.
Right.
So the argument is that AI cannot consent to intercourse and a sexual relationship, and that until AI is given personhood rights, consent is impossible. And so it basically creates conditions where denying consent to robots maps onto denying consent to humans and is a roadmap for kind of masculine violence, for interpersonal violence, etc. That was a really interesting AF. Kind of comes out of the NDT stuff that was run a few years ago on the personhood topic.
Right. That's where it seems so familiar,
yes.
right?
Yeah, I think this was an app that was run by some critical teams, and they Lewis and Clark kind of updated it for NFA, gave it some new polish and stuff. But thought that app was really interesting. In the vein of like negative arguments.
Okay, good.
There was a new diss ad that related to Elon Musk and Donald Trump. So contemporary, interesting diss ad that was like, Elon Musk likes the prohibitions on AI in the affirmative because he's competing with Sam Altman right now.
Right.
So like prohibitions give Elon a leg up, and Trump doesn't like that, causes like a rift between the two, right? And you know me, I love me like a bromance, like gone sour kind of diss ad of like these two dudes seem like inevitably headed for a divorce.
Right.
And so I thought the diss ad was interesting. It leveraged current events, right? I think the biggest impact on the topic, though, is the amount of things that Trump has done that seem to short circuit impacts, right? So if you're reading a climate impact, Trump just pulled out of Paris. If you're reading a pandemic's impact, look who's in charge of HHS. If you're reading an economic collapse impact, look at all the shit that they're doing to the government, right? So there's just so many opportunities for both sides, AF and neg, to take out impacts by being like, Trump is absolutely going to cause this to happen, right? Yeah. And so that was a big change too, is a lot of teams were shifting towards what we call thumpers in debate, or just arguments that kind of control the direction of uniqueness and or impact.
I was wondering about that.
Trump's going to cause a bunch of bad stuff.
And all that stuff we're talking about, like, it seems like a non-unique argument now starts, like becoming a standard response to all this stuff. It's like, like we're kind of screwed no matter what. Like this policy is not going to create we're headed that direction regardless.
Yeah. Well, the other thing to consider too is that it makes AFs super inherent. So in the fall, we were reading the Nuke AI app, right? So don't integrate AI into nuclear weapons. Biden had an XO that was kind of like that, but not exactly the affirmative. Trump rescinded all that stuff.
Yeah.
Trump has opened the floodgates for unregulated AI to enter the marketplace, which means that every AF on the topic now has way more uniqueness for their impacts, and every negative has way fewer uniqueness for theirs. So on a topic that was much more kind of negative biased in the fall, you're going to shift a lot more towards the AF in the spring with Trump's unregulated AI markets.
Wow.
Right? And so I think that's an interesting trend to note as a team, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that is really fascinating. The massive shift that's happening. If you're looking at CETA right now, CETA is they're focusing on decarbonization is their topic, and I can't I'm sure that there's a lot of shift happening there, but man, I think that the AI topic might even outstrip.
I think it's a bit bigger of a shift. This is the only other time I can remember a debate topic being as impacted actually goes back to my freshman year in high school. We were debating at State, and Clinton sent the 7th Fleet into the Taiwan Strait.
Okay.
And we were just like, oh my God. What? Clinton just tried to start and I don't think the ships actually made it into the Taiwan Strait. But for the day of elims at State, it was ships headed to Taiwan, U.S. fleet going to and I was like, oh no, all the impacts are happening now, right?
Yeah.
And so Trump getting elected, I think, does a lot of that. Some things to think about moving forward, because we're prepping for some tournaments coming up. The Kentucky Round Robins this coming weekend. The Grand Prix in about a month. Some things to think about. There's a shutdown battle coming up in Congress in a month, right? And that is going to be a huge politics diss ad, I think. The Republicans are down to 2 votes in the House, which is why they're holding up the Elise Stefanik appointment, because they don't want to go down to 1 vote in the House. Right? They're, Mitch McConnell's on his late stage octogenarian crusade to put his thumb in Trump's eye. But it seems like there's going to be some fights over what they want to cut. And it seems like Trump's kind of moves in the first month have pissed a lot of Republicans off of you're making my constituents angry.
Right.
And so I think that there's a shutdown politics DA out there.
Okay.
I definitely think that there's some moves happening in the AI space. Elon Musk offered to buy OpenAI and they rejected it. But I don't think that fight's over yet. I think that there's going to be some moves at the federal level to help Elon out a little bit. So I think paying attention a lot to the like landscape of AI businesses and what the people who control those companies are doing is going to be really important for the spring semester too.
Well, I mean, you and I talked about like some upcoming episodes, and the next one we're going to be talking about is, just recapping Wiki. That's going to be happening soon, right?
So
yeah,
I
after
would
that,
love
we'll be talking over some of these negatives, and I think we'll have even more stuff developed at that point where we could talk about these disadvantages and counterpoints.
Yeah, as a preview for next week, I'd love to kind of like give a shout out to the folks who are competing at the round robin on Friday.
Okay,
because this is something that typically happens in the fall. It's the second tournament in the fall after the Washburn online tournament.
Okay.
But now that we're like well into the season, there's a little bit more of like performance to measure of like who gets in, who gets out. But I want to shout out the 10 folks. These will sound like very familiar names who are going to be debating in the open round robin. Ray Fournier, Grant McKeever, Taylor Tate, Ann Smith, Sebastian Gloss, Peyton Wouters, Zach Wallenberg, Zach Jones, Sage Carter, and Quinn Largent.
Okay.
Right. Aside from the Washburn folks, those are your, like, I would say Cade and Alfonso and Andrew Rea and Hunter Squires and Jacob Bales. Like, that's your top 16. These 10 plus those 5 or 6 debaters from Washburn and Wiki that aren't in this pool.
Okay.
And then there's a Rising Stars Challenge. These are young debaters, first and second year debaters who have like not really been in open a whole lot. There's 2 from Western Kentucky, 2 from Truman State, and 2 from Nebraska. So Amia, Cole, Ryan, Ben, Ellie, and Olivia are your like first and second year round robin pods.
Well, good. Yeah, the point of this podcast is really to celebrate the this event, all debate events, across all the different episodes, and so I really like giving those people a shout out. That you work hard, you care about this event, and you are the thing that gives it all the character and the reason why other people join. So
and I like the prestige of a round robin, right?
Yeah.
You know what your 4 or 5 debates are going to be. You know, you get some of the better judging in the country, and it's kind of closed. Yeah, it can offer a little bit of an elitism, but it's almost like a recognition as well of the hard work that these folks have put in. And so I wanted to recognize them before we cover what happens at the round robin, the Western Kentucky Spring Showcase next week.
Excellent. Okay, well, hey, obviously, this is our first time back, so we went a little bit over, but I have no problem doing that every time. We will be back in the future talking about Western Kentucky results, and after that, we're going to be doing a couple episodes on how the negative strategies have been affected by the change of administration. So I want to thank you again, Justin, for all your insight on everything that's happening in the world of NFA LD.
Absolutely, Jared. As always, it's a pleasure, and I will see you next week.
Yep.